I didn't think I could feel anything again. There was a time when people looked at my life and assumed I had won. I was older now, established, surrounded by things men chase when they still believe success can warm a cold bed. I had rooms full of furniture, calendars full of obligations, a name that opened doors. But inside me, something had gone dry years ago. I almost turned this recording off. Because if I am honest, I am not speaking to a crowd. I am speaking to one woman I have never fully known, yet somehow have always recognized you. The one who may hear the truth in my voice and understand it without asking me to clean it up. And I am speaking because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. There was a winter night I remember too clearly. The kitchen light above the stove was the only light left on in the house. Everything else was dark. A plate sat untouched on the counter. The food had gone cold hours earlier, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I kept thinking someone might still walk in and say, "I'm home." No one did. The refrigerator hummed like it was trying to fill the silence for me. Cold air slipped through the cracked window above the sink. I stood there with both hands pressed against the counter because they were shaking, and I did not know why. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. That was the first night I realized loneliness can make noise. It is not always quiet. Sometimes it hums through walls. Sometimes it hums through walls. Sometimes it speaks in the sound of a key that never turns in the lock. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought pain only came from betrayal, from harsh words, from dramatic endings. But some of the deepest pain comes from waiting faithfully for something that has already left. If you have ever waited for someone who never came, maybe you know the sound of that kind of silence. I used to tell myself I was strong because I did not cry. Men are taught to mistake numbness for strength. We learn how to keep our faces still while something collapses behind our ribs. We call it maturity, discipline, control. But it was grief wearing expensive clothes. There was another night, 3 a.m. I know because the clock beside the bed glowed 3007 in blue numbers. I had not slept more than an hour. The room smelled faintly of detergent from clean sheets no one else had touched. I stared at the ceiling while the city outside moved on without me. I reached for my phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Do you know how many people die inside unfinished text messages? I had things to say I could not send, questions that had nowhere to land, anger that softened into sadness before it reached my thumbs. Love with no address left. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. What hurt most was not losing her. It was realizing I had made someone else my proof that I mattered. Maybe someone has been trying to get through to me all these years. Maybe the breaking was not punishment. Maybe it was exposure. Baby life was showing me the places where I had handed away my worth and called it devotion. If you have ever loved someone more carefully than you loved yourself, then you know how expensive that lesson becomes. There was a chair in my living room for months that no one sat in. Strange. The things we cannot move. I would pass it every morning with coffee in my hand. Sunlight would hit one side of it. Dust gathered slowly on the armrest. It belonged to another chapter, another version of me who believed if he stayed patient enough, kind enough, useful enough, he would be chosen. I left it there because part of me believed removing the chair meant admitting the story was over. I was ashamed of that. Ashamed that a grown man could be haunted by furniture. But the truth underneath it was worse. I was terrified of abandonment long before anyone left me. That is the confession I avoided for years. Some people fear failure. Some fear poverty. Some fear being ordinary. I feared being left once I was fully known. So I became useful, impressive, calm, needed. I learned how to offer value before I offered vulnerability. I learned how to perform steadiness while starving for tenderness. And when people left, I told myself they were ungrateful. But beneath that pride was an older wound, whispering, "See, even now." I didn't understand it then. Sometimes we do not choose people because they are right for us. Sometimes we choose them because they match an old pain we are still trying to solve. If you have ever confused familiar hurt with love, I see you. There was a hospital waiting room once, pale walls, harsh fluorescent lights, coffee burnt on a warmer in the corner. I sat there alone while machines somewhere behind closed doors kept someone breathing. I remember watching families hold each other, hands on shoulders, heads leaning together, small circles of comfort. And I remember realizing success cannot sit beside you in a waiting room. Titles cannot squeeze your hand. Money cannot whisper, "I'm here." I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now, that was the night I understood I had built a life many admired and almost no one could inhabit with me. Maybe God whispers softly because broken men only listen when the room is quiet enough. Maybe emptiness has language too. If you have ever looked around your own life and seen how full it was and still felt abandoned inside it, then you know what I mean. I wish I could tell you healing arrived like sunrise. It didn't. It came like a match struck in a damp room, small, uncertain, easy to miss. A stranger smiled at me one morning when I looked tired. A child laughed in a grocery aisle. A song I had forgotten found me in traffic. Tiny mercies, tiny reminders that my heart was not dead, only hidden under ash. And then, somehow, the thought of you began. Not you exactly, not a face, not a name. More like the possibility of someone gentle enough to hear the truth in me and not use it against me. Someone warm without being loud. Someone who knew pain but had not married it. Someone who might understand that men can look whole while bleeding privately. I don't know why I'm picturing a future that doesn't feel as empty. That thought scares me more than despair ever did, because hopelessness asks nothing. Hope asks everything. It asks me to risk being seen. It asks me to believe tenderness may still have my address. It asks me to imagine that somewhere a woman exists who would not punish me for being human. I'm not certain yet. I'm only honest enough now to admit I want it. And if you are out there carrying your own quiet ache, your own memories of doors closing, your own nights of staring at ceilings and bargaining with silence, then maybe this confession is finding the person it was meant for. I didn't know then that someone would someday listen to what I never said. I spent years pretending I was over it. By then, I had learned how to wear composure the way some men wear cologne, something applied before entering a room so no one notices what is decaying underneath. My hair carried more silver than before. My shoulders looked broader in tailored jackets. My schedule stayed full enough to keep people impressed and me distracted. I almost kept quiet again. But I am not speaking to the world tonight. I am speaking to one woman whose heart may know the same hidden weather mine has known. You, the one who might understand why a man can look settled while something restless keeps walking inside him. And I am speaking because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. There was an evening when rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. I had returned home late, loosened my tie, placed my keys in the bowl near the door, and stood in the hallway longer than necessary. No music, no footsteps, no voice calling from another room, only the soft dripping of water from my coat onto the floor. I remember taking off one shoe, then the other, and hearing the sound echo farther than it should have in a house that size. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now, there are moments when success feels like a beautifully furnished emptiness. Everything in that house was chosen carefully. The art, the wood, the lighting, the glassware. Yet none of it knew my name. None of it cared whether it was exhausted or lonely or slowly disappearing inside myself. I didn't understand it at the time. I felt loneliness belonged to people who had nothing. I did not know it could live comfortably among polished floors and expensive silence. If you have ever built a life others admired while secretly wishing someone would simply ask how you were doing, maybe you know what I mean. I used to keep busy because stillness was dangerous. Stillness brought memories. The sound of a door closing too softly after an argument no one repaired. The smell of perfume left on a scarf long after she was gone. The sight of 2 coffee cups in a cabinet when only one was ever used now. Memories are strange. They do not knock. They wait until you are tired, then sit beside you uninvited. One night I opened a drawer looking for a receipt and found an old handwritten note folded in half. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary words written during ordinary love. Don't forget to eat. I stood there holding that paper like it was evidence from another life. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. Sometimes what breaks a man is not grand betrayal. Sometimes it is tenderness that no longer exists. Maybe that is why people become guarded. Not because cruelty hurt the most, but because kindness did. I wonder if someone has been trying to teach me that love is precious because it can vanish. If you have ever cried over something small because it represented something huge, I see you. About halfway through those years, I became someone efficient. I answered messages quickly, handled problems calmly, made decisions without hesitation. People praised my discipline. What they called discipline was often dissociation. I need to confess something I was ashamed to say. I became jealous of people who still needed others. I would watch couples disagree in restaurants and envy them because at least they were emotionally alive with someone. I would see a tired husband carrying groceries with his wife and feel something bitter rise in me. I would hear a woman laughing into the phone and wonder what it felt like to be the person she wanted to call first. That bitterness embarrassed me. I had achievements, resources, respect, yet I envied ordinary closeness. Do you know what kind of emptiness it takes to resent joy you wish everyone well for? I didn't understand it then. I thought I was angry at them. I was grieving for me. If you have ever become hard in places that were actually hurting, then you know how pain disguises itself. There was another night, 3019 aim this time. I know because I checked the clock again and again as if time itself might explain something. The room was cool. Streetlight came through the curtains in pale bars across the floor. My chest felt heavy for no medical reason at all. I sat up in bed and said out loud to no one, "What is wrong with me?" No answer came, only the hum of the air conditioner and my own breathing. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. What was wrong with me was not weakness, it was ungrieved love. I had buried pain alive and expected it to stay quiet. Maybe God waits patiently outside the rooms we lock ourselves in. Maybe healing begins when we finally ask the right question. Not why did they leave, but why did I leave myself there so long? If you have ever stayed emotionally parked at the scene of your own heartbreak, I hope you hear that gently. And something changed in a way I almost distrust even now. I began noticing warmth again. A cashier remembered my name. An elderly couple held hands crossing a street. A friend hugged me longer than usual after hearing fatigue in my voice. Tiny moments. Nothing cinematic. Yet each one felt like tapping on frozen ground. And beneath the ice, something answered. I found myself wondering what kind of woman notices sadness men try to hide. What kind of woman can hear restraint and know it means fear? What kind of woman has suffered enough herself to become gentle instead of cruel? That is when thoughts of you became less abstract. Still no face, still no certainty, but a presence, a possibility, someone unseen yet strangely familiar to my spirit. I don't know if destiny is real in the way people describe it. I only know some things feel older than logic. As if certain meetings begin before introductions, as if some souls recognize each other from the ache they carry. I don't know why I'm imagining conversations that make the room feel warmer. I don't know why the future has started looking less like a hallway and more like a doorway. That frightens me, because hope asks me to open places I boarded shut. It asks me to believe affection might arrive without hidden knives. It asks me to receive care I do not feel I earned. And I'm still learning that love is not wages for performance. Maybe it can be given, maybe it can be safe, maybe it can meet a tired man exactly where he is. If you're somewhere tonight carrying your own note from the past, your own quiet jealousy of people who seem held, your own fear that tenderness has missed you forever, then perhaps this chapter was meant to find you. I did not know emptiness could one day become a room where something new might enter. I thought I had learned how to survive. By then, the years had taught me how to move through life with measured steps. I knew which calls to answer, which invitations to decline, which smiles to return, which feelings to postpone. I had become a man who functioned well enough that no one asked difficult questions. Older now, more tired than I admitted, outwardly steady, inwardly worn thin in places no one could see. I almost kept this part hidden because collapse sounds dramatic when spoken aloud, but in real life it is often quiet. It happens in clean clothes, on regular days, while everyone assumes you are fine, and I am speaking because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. There was a morning when sunlight entered the bedroom exactly the way people write poems about. Soft gold across the wall, warm edges on the furniture, birds somewhere outside insisting the world was alive. I hated it, not because the morning was cruel, but because I could not feel what it offered. I lay there staring at the ceiling while beauty touched everything except me. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. That framed me more than heartbreak ever had. Heartbreak hurts, but numbness erases. Pain at least proves there is something left to save. Numbness makes you wonder if the person you once were has already died and forgotten to inform the body. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought healing meant pain disappearing. I did not know there is a stage where pain leaves first and joy has not yet returned. If you have ever woken up and felt absent from your own life, maybe you know that strange emptiness. There was an afternoon in my office when everyone had gone home. The building lights dimmed automatically row by row. Screens went dark. Chairs sat tucked neatly under desks like obedient children. I stayed seated long after there was reason to. The city outside the glass moved in streaks of red taillights. People were going somewhere, to dinners, to families, to ordinary warmth. I remained there with a loosened tie and a chest full of static. I opened my laptop to work more, closed it, opened it again, closed it. My hands rested on the desk, motionless. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. I was not dedicated. I was avoiding going home to no witness. Some men overwork because they are ambitious. Some overwork because silence knows their name. Maybe someone has been trying to show me that busyness can become another kind of hiding. If you have ever called exhaustion productivity because resting meant feeling too much, I see you. Then came the collapse. I never announced, no dramatic breakdown, no public scene, just one evening in the grocery store. I stood in an aisle staring at shelves of cereal, unable to remember what I came for. Families moved around me. A child asked for something sweet. A couple debated brands. A cashier laughed in the distance, and I stood there like a man who had misplaced himself. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. I left the cart where it was and walked outside into cold air, hands shaking, breathing shallow, heart racing for reasons invisible to everyone else. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left. I need to confess something I was ashamed to say. I whispered, "I don't want to do this alone anymore." That sentence cost me years of pride. I had built an identity around capability, around being the one others relied on, around needing little, asking less, carrying much. But there in that parking lot, under fluorescent lights and a darkening sky, I met the truth. Strength without intimacy becomes starvation. I didn't understand it then. I thought loneliness meant lacking company. No, loneliness is carrying your full interior life where no one ever touches it. If you have ever been surrounded by people and still felt emotionally unfed, then you know. That night I drove home slower than usual. Rain had begun. Wipers moved rhythmically. Streetlights smeared across the windshield like memories refusing clear shape. I spoke to God more honestly than I had in years. Not polished words, not noble ones, just tired ones. I cannot keep being this man. There was no thunderous answer. Only the strange peace that comes when truth is finally spoken. Maybe divine mercy sometimes arrives as the courage to stop pretending. Maybe prayer is less about eloquence and more about surrender. When I walked into the house, I noticed how cold it felt. Not temperature. Spirit. I stood in the living room and saw it differently for the first time. The chair no one used. The lamp lit for no one. The carefully chosen objects that had become scenery around my absence. And suddenly I wanted warmth more than image. I wanted laughter interrupting me. Wanted another cup beside mine. Wanted someone to notice when my voice sounded tired. Wanted to notice her tiredness too. Wanted the ordinary sacredness of being known in small daily ways. That desire surprised me. I'd spent years acting above need. But the soul does not become less human because the ego is disciplined. Then you entered my thoughts again, still unseen, still unnamed, yet closer now. Not fantasy, not rescue in the childish sense, more like invitation. A woman who would not complete me but call me back to the parts I abandoned. A woman with her own scars, her own midnight ceilings, her own reasons for hesitating. A woman who might understand that careful men are often wounded men. I don't know why I began imagining making tea for someone at dawn. Why the thought of hearing another set of footsteps in the hallway felt holy. Why I pictured conversations where no one performs strength. Why the future stopped looking like something to endure and started looking like something to prepare for. That scared me deeply. Because once a heart thaws, it can be heard again. Hope reopens every door fear worked hard to seal, and still, something in me preferred risk to vacancy. If you are somewhere carrying your own invisible collapse, your own grocery store moment, your own whispered confession in a parked car, hear me carefully. Needing love does not make you weak. Wanting tenderness does not reduce your worth. Being tired of solitude is not failure. It may be the first honest sign you are still alive. I did not know then that emptiness was making room for someone I had not yet met. I never expected peace to arrive so quietly. Not with fireworks, not with certainty, not with some grand moment where the past apologized and every wound explained itself. It came softer than that, older than that, like something patient had been waiting outside my locked heart for years. I am an older man now, scarred in ways no mirror shows, accomplished enough to know achievements cannot hold you at night, wiser only because pain forced lessons pride refused to learn. I almost ended this story before reaching here, because speaking of hope after heartbreak can feel dangerous. Some wounds become identities if we protect them long enough. But I am not speaking to everyone. I am speaking to one woman, you, the one who has also smiled while carrying private storms, the one who still has tenderness left despite everything that tried to harden you, the one who may have thought love forgot your address. And I am speaking because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. There was a morning not long ago when I stood in my kitchen again, same room, same counter, same window above the sink. Years earlier, I stood there waiting for footsteps that never came. That room once held cold food, colder silence, and a man who mistook abandonment for destiny. But this time, sunlight entered differently. Or maybe I did. I made coffee. Steam rose slowly. The air smelled warm and alive. I placed one cup on the counter, then, without thinking, reached for a second. I stopped, stared at it, and smiled in a way that surprised me. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. Healing sometimes reveals itself in gestures meant for someone who is not there yet. A second cup, space at the table, fresh sheets on a bed no guest has claimed. The heart prepares before life confirms. I didn't understand this before. I thought love began when another person arrived. Maybe sometimes love begins when we become ready to receive them. If you have ever found yourself making room for joy before evidence appears, maybe your soul knows something your fear does not. I carried shame for years. Shame that I stayed too long where I was unloved. Shame that I begged silently for crumbs while pretending standards. Shame that I let one person's leaving become a verdict over my worth. I need to confess something I once could barely admit. Part of me believed pain was all I deserved, that if affection ever came freely, there must be a trap behind it, that if someone kind appeared, they simply had not seen enough of me yet. So I trusted difficulty more than tenderness. I trusted distance more than warmth. I trusted being tolerated more than being chosen. That is what old wounds do. They teach lies in the voice of experience. Maybe God whispers truth so gently because damaged hearts startle easily. Maybe grace often sounds like this: you were never meant to earn what healthy love gives naturally. If you have ever doubted compliments, questioned kindness, or waited for people to turn cold because others once did, I see how tired that makes a soul. There was another moment recently, evening rain against the windows, a quiet room, no crisis, no ache clawing at my chest, just peace. I sat there and realized I was no longer rehearsing conversations with ghosts. No longer composing speeches for people who had moved on. No longer trying to be enough for those committed to misunderstanding me. The past had not vanished. It had simply lost authority. I didn't say this to anyone then, but I'll tell you now. Closure is not always an apology. Sometimes closure is when their memory no longer controls the temperature of your day. I didn't understand that for years. I thought closure required their participation. No. Some doors are healed by the hand that was left behind. If you have waited for someone else to free you, perhaps this is your reminder that the key may already be in your pocket. And then there is you. Still unseen, perhaps. Still somewhere on your own road. Still carrying your own chapters of loss, hesitation, guarded laughter, interrupted trust. Yet I feel compelled to say this plainly. I do not need perfection from you. I do not need a woman untouched by pain. I do not need someone who never doubted, never cried, never broke. I would rather meet a real heart than an impressive mask. Bring your scars honestly. Bring your questions. Bring the parts of you that learned caution. Bring the tenderness you thought had expired. I know how to be gentle with broken things now, because I finally learned to be gentle with myself. I don't know what shape our meeting would take. Maybe a conversation that lasts longer than expected. Maybe a laugh that disarms old defenses. Maybe the strange calm of being recognized without performance. Maybe two people, both tired of surviving alone, choosing something softer. I don't know why I can picture a future that feels warm instead of empty. A kitchen with 2 cups used. A hallway with returning footsteps. A couch where silence is peaceful, not punishing. Hands meeting after long winters. Prayers answered so quietly we almost mistake them for coincidence. That future no longer terrifies me the way it once did. Because hope is no longer a threat. It is permission. Permission to begin again without denying what happened. Permission to receive love without suspicion ruling every room. Permission to be chosen and stay human. Permission to believe some endings were mercy in disguise. If you're listening while carrying your own pain from someone who promised forever and became your wound, hear me clearly, they were not the end of your story. They may have been the fire, but fire can refine as well as destroy. And what remains after honest burning is often stronger, softer, truer than what existed before. So if life has wearied you, if silence has followed you, if affection feels late, if trust feels expensive, walk toward hope anyway. Slowly if needed, shaking if needed, but walk. Because somewhere ahead may be the love that does not demand your suffering as proof. Somewhere ahead may be the peace you thought belonged to other people. Somewhere ahead may be someone who thanks God you did not give up before reaching them. And if something in this story met you where you were hurting, stay close. Subscribe, share, or leave yours. No one heals alone. I didn't know then that losing what hurt me would make room for what could love me.